Anna from NHCSR here. It is wintertime and we are planning our field season for the growing season. And I'm reading up about peppers these days. I'm interested in pepper maggot, which is kind of an obscure pest of peppers. But before we get into an obscure pest, I want to understand more about some of the other diseases, nutritional problems, and other insect damage that might be mistaken for pepper maggot. And while I'm at it, I need to learn about peppers. So I was so lucky to be connected with Best in the Biz, Stephanie Walker, who runs a breeding program down in New Mexico. You'll hear more from her, but during our conversation today, she mentions the chili pepper Breeding Institute. And I'm going to link to that because not only do they have a lot of great information about the history of chili peppers, the breeding program that they are currently working on, but it's a store. You can buy heritage chili pepper seeds from the Chili Pepper Institute, which I think I am going to make some purchases and they might be shown in this year's variety trials. You'll learn more about that in my conversation with Dr. Walker.
So I'm Stephanie Walker. I serve as the Extension Vegetable Specialist at New Mexico State University. I'm based on the main campus in Las Cruces, New Mexico, but I do have statewide responsibilities. As vegetable specialist, I have interest and responsibility for any vegetable that anybody would grow here in the state. But certainly chili peppers are most famous and one of the most widely grown commercial vegetables here in the state. You know, we have relatively large farms that grow them, but we also have many small family farms throughout the state that, you know, much of their livelihood is based on their production of excellent chili peppers. So how did I get into this? So, you know, I'm often told that, yeah, vegetable specialist, what a dream job. And absolutely, it's a wonderful job. I mean, I've had such a great career working with master gardeners all the way up to commercial growers. But I originally really became interested in this field by working in industry. So after I got my bachelor's degree specializing in microbiology here at New Mexico State University, I actually got a job as a quality control supervisor at the old El Paso plant, which was about 30 miles from where I lived in Las Cruces in Anthony, Texas. And I worked there for 10 years.
We were just laughing about the old commercials like New York City.
Oh, I was right there for all of that. Yeah. And it was kind of funny because, you know, at the time we were actually part of, well, when I left, we were part of Pillsbury. Pillsbury had bought us out. And so on the labels, it has the corporate headquarters address, not actually there in, you know, right on the New Mexico-Texas border where we're actually producing the chili peppers. But you know, I'd always been interested in genetics. After looking at tons and tons and tons of green chili go through our processing plant on the inspection belt, I really kind of got the idea in my head, you know, we could improve on our performance here with green chili processing if we bred certain characteristics into the chili pepper. After 10 years working in industry, I put in my application at New Mexico State University and was very fortunate that Dr. Paul Boslin, the world internationally renowned chili pepper breeder, accepted me into his program. So I got my master's in chili genetics, basically chili genetics and breeding with Paul Boslin, working on disease resistance breeding. Shortly after that, I actually accepted a job in the Extension Plant Sciences Department. So I'm 75% extension. I do a lot of extension training, but 25% research. And most of that 25% research has involved breeding chili peppers for mechanical harvest attributes, increased quality, increased pigment, increased yield, of course, is always important. So that's how I got into this, and bit of a non-traditional route.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's a huge difference serving that broad of an audience. When people think about vegetables, like I couldn't think of a more broad, group of plants from a biological point of view. I have a ton of questions for you about the industry and breeding for the industry and breeding for all the different grower groups you work with. But let's start out by getting into the weeds. Like, what should I know about pepper genetics from like a novice's point of view? Like,
yeah. So So there's 5 different domesticated species of chili peppers, throughout the globe, but by far the most widely grown one is capsicum annuum. So capsicum annuum includes our bell peppers, it includes jalapenos, it also includes the New Mexico type chili. So one thing I will quickly mention is, we call it New Mexico type chili. It's widely incorrectly referred to as Anaheim chili, or or even Hatch chili. In fact,
Okay.
it always disturbs me when I pick up a catalog and see one of our amazing New Mexico type chilies being referred to in a seed catalog as Anaheim, because it was actually Fabian Garcia was actually the first head of the Ag Experiment Stations at what is now New Mexico State University. And he really saw that we had these different, diverse land races of capsicum annuum being grown. And even he thought back that, hey, if I standardize this, maybe bring down the heat a little bit to appeal to a wider audience, make them easier to peel, we might really have something. And so he did. So he released the very first New Mexico type chili, which is New Mexico #9. And the only reason we have Anaheim chili is because he was visited by a gentleman, Ortega, when he was doing this research. And Mr. Ortega was very impressed with these chili lines that Fabian Garcia developed. He asked to take seed back with him to Anaheim, California, and he started his own breeding program and developed long green chili for the California climate. And that was the kickoff of the Ortega cannery, of course.
Anaheim style came from, which is like a more mild but flavorful chili pepper. Is that how you would define an Anaheim
Well,
style?
perhaps I'm biased, but I wouldn't call it more flavorful.
Yeah, true.
Certainly milder. Yeah, they did take more of the
Milder.
heat out with the Anaheim varieties. So anyway, though, Fabian Garcia started the longest running chili pepper breeding program in the world right now, and so we've had a succession of chili pepper breeders here ever since. And starting with that New Mexico #9, the first one, different breeders developed different varieties for different purposes, for different heat levels, certainly. We also have two main chili pepper industries here in New Mexico based on the New Mexico type chili. So we have the very thick meated green chili, and then we have the easier to dry red chili industry. And that product is usually dried, powdered. Much of it actually goes into natural red food coloring as well. Very different breeding goals, whether you're trying to breed a really good green chili that you might want to use in a chili relleno, very thick meated, versus a red that you want typically highly pigmented, very low or non-pungent, that will go into powders and colorants.
You already mentioned a couple different things that were important to breeding characteristics. One had to do with harvesting. Is that what you mentioned?
Yeah, so that's when I came back to graduate school after working in industry for a long time. It was really clear, from my vantage point there at that job, that we needed to move towards mechanization. We were already starting to have issues with farmers not having enough labor to harvest their crop during the relatively short harvest window. And another big thing was stems, so the pedicels. So when you process green chili through a processing plant, that material needs to be removed, because if not, it stays in the product. And I think most people who eat salsa have had the experience of biting on some woody stem material in their salsa. And so it's a serious quality and safety issue when that's in there. And in the field, typically when you're hand harvesting green chili, the farm laborers will pop that stem off when they pick the chili off. If we go through with the machine, though, we need to have a way to mechanically destem it. So when I first came in, I had wanted to work on breeding for easy destemming chili. And basically at the time I was told, well, that's not a project. We don't have funding for, which is great. So I got to learn a lot about Phytophthora capsicum, which is a real serious disease that causes chili wilt. And so that was my master's. For my PhD, though, I was already working at the university, so I was able to self-fund and work on the research I wanted to work on. So I started working in mechanical harvest, and first trying to optimize red chili for mechanical harvest. And red chili is a lot easier because since it's dried and ground and powdered, we don't worry about breakage and issues like that as much. With green chili, we had to have them picked in a good intact form, preferably no breakage and preferably easy destemming. Although
Yeah.
I have
And
to
that's
confess,
specifically for the processing market, right?
yes, yeah, and
Okay.
that right, and that was my goal. And absolutely, if you're growing chili for a fresh market, consumers prefer to have the stem on.
Yeah.
It keeps them from drying out as quick, and it looks good. For chili rellenos, usually they're done with the stem on. But for the processors, we need to get those pedicels or stems off.
It's so funny though because I have a colleague here in UNH and he's a pumpkin breeder. And for the people who are growing pick your own pumpkin, like that stem, like they're breeding for stem strength
Oh
because they have
yeah.
people coming in and grabbing it by the stem and he's like, we're not really breeding for anything but stem here. And so it's so funny that you're like, yes, we want for that one, keep the stem on, for that one, lose the stem.
Absolutely, and that's really, I mean, that's kind of the whole what comes down to the basics of vegetable breeding in general. It's like what is its purpose? What are the final customers going to want? What is going to make this best for the growers? Often always disease resistance. Always high yield and stuff. But then there's other unique things for each vegetable that breeders need to keep in mind.
Yeah. And it sounds like your grower audience has diversified over the years too. Like you mentioned, you have the bigger producers and then you have smaller producers. What are your smaller producers looking for?
Well, certainly always the smaller producers always want yield. And actually, the smaller producers really love the more traditional varieties. Many of them that were delivered or developed back in the 1950s, the 1970s. Like a New Mexico 6-4 is quite famous for being a real flavorful, kind of mild to medium heat chili. We have Big Jim, which was actually released. The breeder at New Mexico State University at the time, Roy Nakayama, was working with a growing family in Hatch, New Mexico, and they collaboratively developed and released Big Jim, which got the world's records for the biggest green chili fruit. And of course, for small farms, they love that. If they can give their customers really large, meaty green chili fruit, yeah, it makes everybody very happy.
That's amazing. And how different from like a genetic point of view are the hot chilies to the sweet bell peppers?
Yeah, so bell peppers are also in the species Capsicum annum, and so they will cross-pollinate very easily. Many people think that chili peppers will only self-pollinate, and that's not true. If you have bees and pollinators moving around pollen, you will get some, and you save seed. It won't affect it. It won't affect it the first season. But if you save seed, you can end up with hottish bell peppery looking things, or mild green chili looking things.
So when you're doing your breeding programs, like, do you have to worry about riffraff? Like, do you need to have some distance between your plots,
Oh,
or
absolutely. We cage,
how do you
we
do
cage,
that?
we'd use insect netting
Okay.
cages to cage hundreds of accessions. So actually, I'm also involved with the Chili Pepper Institute here at New Mexico State University. And if you go to, and this might be a good site to share with your viewership. At the Chili Pepper Institute, you can buy packets of these various heirloom chili varieties, many that were developed by breeders in past generations here at New Mexico State University. So in order to produce hundreds of different lines and increase the seed every year, yeah, we have to go through, we strip off all the open flowers, any set fruit early in the season, then we put up these insect excluding cages, and the chili peppers will self-pollinate, very well under these cages, but we don't have to worry about that stray pollen being brought in by bees.
Right, and you're in such an arid climate, you probably don't have to worry too much about like fungal pathogens building up inside those enclosures, or is that another
No, yeah,
aspect?
because it is dry, we don't, we do have some foliar diseases, especially if we have rainfall or moist conditions later in the season. We always get powdery mildew now. Some years we'll get bacterial leaf spot, but many foliar diseases are just not as bad here. It's true.
Yeah.
Our fungal pathogens are root rots, and we have lots of different soil-borne fungal organisms that give us trouble in that way.
So you're basically just making sure that you have good sanitation practices, like you're not moving soil around. Is that kind of the name of the game?
Oh yeah, and certainly, robust crop rotation is important, and really, the growers really find that if you're rotating with non-hosts, they get a lot farther than trying to actually treat the soil, with any chemicals. And so I'm very happy to say that yeah, the growers really use very natural, sustainable methods to keep their soil healthy.
It's amazing. I have a couple of questions that are kind of veering into like what grinds your gears, right? So I was asking a few of my collaborators on this project, if you had a chance to talk to a chili breeder, what would you want to know? And almost everybody was like, is there like tension between people who want just like a super hot chili pepper versus a flavorful chili pepper? Like I think from my perspective, I'm like, what is the obsession with these hot peppers? Like these like crotch grabbingly hot chili peppers. Like why can't we just make a tasty chili pepper that's like got a little bit of heat? Is that a conversation that you all have within your professional circles or is that a non-issue?
No, no, it's kind of a non-issue because yeah, there's definitely a very special but very small segment of the population that they can't get them hot enough. We're talking about the super hots in excessive of 1 million Scoville heat units, but there's so few people that are that type of consumer looking for that kind of pepper. So I know that there is a breeder in I can't remember what state he's from, Ed Curry, who kind of has made it his life's goal to develop hotter and hotter peppers. So I haven't seen his Pepper X. I know that he released recently, but we have enough breeders that are just that's their thing is breeding
Yeah.
these super hot ones. So we Paul Boslin, who was my advisor here, who's has now retired as our chili pepper breeder, did work on some of the super hots. In fact, he's the first one who released the ghost pepper, the Buchalokia,
Okay.
and that was the first. It was a land race from India, and he basically got seed of it, standardized it, was able to release it as the first super hot chili variety. It really spurred on the development of these super hots. And usually the super hots are typically they're not the anams tend to be much milder, so usually those are in the species Chinense. So
Okay.
habaneros are Chinense, the ghost peppers are capsicum Chinense as well.
And
But
What about Thai chili? Where does that fall?
I think they're hot also. Many of them are frutescens. They do have some chinense there as well. Anams can be hot, but nothing compared to the, in the 100,000, million Scoville heat range. Usually, like the New Mexico types, a real hot one might be 5,000 to 10,000 Scoville heat units. So usually what we aim for just to please the most number of consumers is about 1,000 Scoville heat units, 1,000 to maybe 2,000.
It puts some stank on it. But like, is there any kind of like trade-offs between flavor and heat? Like in my mind, that's like, oh, like you're probably like, if you're breeding for heat, then you're not breeding for other things. Like, is that a naive thing for me to think?
No, no, I guess I would say when you get to those really hot ones, and maybe this is my bias partially, but I just don't think you sense the flavor because your taste buds are
Right.
immediately overwhelmed with pain, so or that heat. So we have just started. I actually have a graduate student that just started recently where she is looking into just the actual flavor components. So like we know. We by tasting, if you've worked in this business long enough, you can taste a real flavorful chili. But really, in order to make progress in breeding, we need to be able to recognize what are these flavors that contribute to a delicious tasting New Mexico type green chili. So that's what my student is working on now, and yeah, we'll see what she finds out here in the next couple of
So
years.
good. Do you grow chili peppers in your backyard garden, or is that just a work thing?
I used to quite a bit, and then I finally realized that anything I want to grow in my backyard, I can just put as border rows in my field because I usually have fields in Las Cruces, Los Lunas around the state. So might as well let the crew
Yeah.
tend to, because I'm usually too busy in the summer to do much weeding and taking care of my garden.
What are you growing for yourself?
Oh, for myself, I love Sandia. And New Mex Sandia Select was an improvement that Paul Boslin and his colleague Denise Kuhn released a few years back. It's a nice, straight, thick-meated, relatively hot type green chili. So And 6'4", I do like 6'4". I tend to take my work home a lot. So if I want to look at something that I did not get in my field at work, that I will put it in my garden and kind of look for segregating populations of stuff. What I've mainly done though with my garden over the years is so I came into this as a chili focused person, but then suddenly I was getting questions about every vegetable under the sun. So I have spent my career gardening and growing really unusual vegetables, just so I know what goes into them, how you do this right, how you cook them, how you taste them, and then I can report to all the groups that I do vegetable training around the state.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you want people to know about this? Like, is there anything that you wish I had asked you?
Well, I guess I will say hatch chili. So I mentioned how, when I see Anaheim chili, it really should be that, oh, Anaheim chili is a type of New Mexico chili as opposed to our New Mexico varieties being under Anaheim, the Anaheim banner. The other one is hatch. So many people refer to New Mexico type chili as hatch chili, and there is no hatch chili per se.
Mm.
What we have is we have a community just north of Las Cruces called Hatch. It's an amazing valley. It's water fed from the Rio Grande, great soil, great chili producers. I mean, these are family businesses, family farms that have gone on for generations. But there is no, what a Hatch chili is basically a New Mexico type chili that's grown in the Hatch area. But just because a can says that it's hatch chili does not necessarily mean that it was grown in the hatch area, because the growers there don't have the rights to the hatch label, which so buyer beware.
So it's not like the provenance of like champagne is only champagne if it's grown in the Champagne region. Like they don't
Right.
have that protection.
So we did a few years back, the New Mexico state legislature did pass a law that if it's labeled as New Mexico chili, you need to prove that it was actually grown in New Mexico, but that
Okay.
only applies to New Mexico, so that we have no jurisdiction out of the state.
Well, now that we are seeing some of these things make it to labels, like I definitely have seen hatch chilies on labels, and most of the time you don't really think about varieties, but we are starting to see a lot of like apple breeding or apple industries try to do like club varieties and put a provenance on things and restrict who can grow what. Are you seeing outside of the program that you just talked about in New Mexico, are you seeing that happening in the pepper industry at all?
Just a little bit, and we're
Yeah.
definitely trying to encourage more and more of that. That definitely has been one of my pet peeves. Also, when you go to buy chili and there's the hot bin and the mild bin, I actually went with a friend to buy a sack of red chili from a Hatch farmer this past year, and it was in the hot bin. And so I said, "What's the variety?" "Hot." "But what's the variety?" "It's hot." "But what's the variety?" "Well, Sandia." "Oh, okay, it's
And of course,
Sandia."
you're like, do you even know who you're talking to right now?
He wasn't expecting someone to actually really want the variety, so yeah, he but so he knew what it was, but that's just never the way he sells it. It's just that is his go-to to sell as a hot red chili. Consumers, I know we absolutely have many people who are just chili crazy, chili fanatics out
Yeah.
there, and those are the ones that are going to really embrace particular varieties. Yeah,
Right.
to kind of get farmers market stands or grocery stores or whoever to actually advertise what the variety is, that's going to take more time and more work. But if consumers demand it, it will come.
Right. Well, I'm definitely going to check out that website that you mentioned. I'm really interested in those heritage varieties because I kind of want to talk shop a little bit with you about especially like what entomologists or plant pathologists or people who work in IPM should know about this group. But I guess like my question for you is like what do you want the research community to know about what's going on in your industry? Like
Yeah.
what are the needs?
So entomology-wise, huge needs for chili. So I mentioned, Phytophthora chili wilt, of course, is a big disease. But curly top virus gets us every year, and it's only vectored by beet leafhoppers. So we're always looking for a way, how do we dissuade beet leafhoppers from getting in and infecting our chili? Same with our tomatoes here in the state for home gardeners. The other one is we're seeing more and more tomato spotted wilt virus. So how in the world do you control thrips our onion thrips that are Western flower thrips that come in and bring these various diseases. So
Yeah.
I know, since I also work with onions, since that's our other big commercial vegetable crop here in the state, thrips are, and we can't control them in the greenhouse. The thrips get into the greenhouse, they eat all the pollen out of our flowers, so we can't make controlled cross pollinations. And really, the only way we found to, when it gets really bad, especially after they harvest the onions in the field and all the thrips come into our greenhouse, is having students like every other day apply insecticidal soap. And it's none of the other heavy duty chemicals work against them anymore.
And even then, all you're doing is kind of holding them back, like with your whip
Yes,
and your chair, right? Just like,
yes.
like slowing the spread of it. What is your thinking about the possibility of like someone we talk about in like vectored diseases is treating the population to like clean them out, like giving them an antibiotic or something like that, so that like you have a ton of thrips, but they're not necessarily carrying the pathogen. Like, have you heard any promising results about that?
I have not. Kind of just have heard a little bit about that and have
It's a
not.
pipe dream, kind of.
I, hey, a lot of pipe dreams have really panned out when were pursued
Sure.
by the right researchers, the right people. So I don't know of anyone doing that, but yeah, if there's any possibility,
That would
that
be
would be
really
amazing.
cool. I have so many things to talk to you about just because like I really appreciate that experience you had from going from industry into extension and going from like really laser focused on achieving a really specific goal to now having like the discipline whiplash of serving all of the vegetable growers in New Mexico. Like do you want to talk to that at all? Like give advice for new extension professionals who are going and trying to decide how to spend their time?
Yeah, well, I guess for me it was quite that culture shock isn't exactly the right word, but coming in, I mean, I took all the basic biology classes, basic, plant pathology classes, but suddenly being asked to, talk about, how do you grow artichokes down here? So for me, with me, I jumped in with both feet, and I had a huge garden, and I just started trying everything. I would always get questions I couldn't answer. So I would just be honest and say, I don't know, I'll look into that. And I would go back to the office, I would research the heck out of this particular area that I was asked about that I didn't know how to answer. So after doing this for, gosh, 25 to almost 27 years, I actually said, hey, I've really learned a lot about growing vegetables in New Mexico here. So I'm very rarely stumped now. I'm still stumped sometimes, but yeah, most of the questions I get at my various programs, I have heard, I've already researched, I've already looked into it. So don't expect to know everything immediately when you jump in. You're not going to learn the answers to 100% of clientele questions from the classes that we take in our graduate studies. You
Yeah.
just have to keep learning. I've gotten some of my most crowd pleasing stories and tales from my failures in my garden that I can share with others. And I've certainly gotten feedback saying, "Oh yeah, we're really happy to hear that your tomato crop failed for this reason. Also, we thought it was just us who couldn't grow tomatoes."
Thought question, and maybe you can get back to me about this. But something we've been talking about, especially with these vegetables that you can easily share seeds. We're thinking about developing a citizen science project where we send people who are participating a packet of seeds, a little tag that has like a QR code. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like in the picture, and looking at a couple different things that we're looking at pepper maggot up here in the Northeast. That's something that's kind of an obscure Northeastern pest. And I have a colleague who's looking at monitoring and trying to figure out the best way to do best practices for this obscure thing. But what are some questions, especially thinking about those heritage varieties, what are some questions that we could really contribute something if we took like a really broad geographic range and had it in the hands of a citizen scientist?
Well, flavor. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
flavor. We had dabbled that with tomatoes a while back. The biggest issue, and it's great because the more, since flavor is such a difficult thing to pin down, as we
Yeah.
discussed, getting a lot of people's opinions about the different flavor. As with tomatoes, you have to be really careful to make sure that the people know exactly the right time to harvest. because yeah, if it's too immature, you're not going to have the flavor there. Chili peppers, of course, as they ripen to typically red, the red mature. Many people don't even realize that yeah, green chili and red chili come from the same plants. Still, a lot of visitors might feel like, oh, amazing! What you're doing with breeding here, red and green chili in the same plant. Well, most of the chili, not all, has the red chili mature color, but then it's going to turn sweeter as the sugars form as those fruit are ripening. If you can get people to taste the mature green when it's fully formed but hasn't started turning red yet, and then to compare that flavor across a large group of
Yeah.
volunteers, would be real
So
helpful.
how would you standardize that? Because like it might vary from flower, like you, because you'd want to be like days from fruit set, right? Maybe that would be
Yeah,
something.
but that is going to be impacted by heat units and growing degree days too. So maybe it might be if people can track growing degree days. I know there's online trackers. That would probably be the best way for people to do it.
That's a good. Is there anything else you'd look for to like standardize ripeness or the stage of ripeness for a novice?
Yeah, well, just what we teach all our undergraduate students that join our program is that one of the very first lessons they have to learn. They can be a little bit tough, but some of my online extension publications also have, how do you judge when a green chili is ripe? It's just they're going to start getting more shiny, so the outside cuticle gets more glossy, and when you squeeze, they're firmer. So when they're still immature, they're a little bit more squishy. So when they're glossy, firm, but have not started to blush yet or give any indication of turning color, is when you
Okay.
do it. And
And
then
you're
you
going
have
to have multiple fruit on a plant that are of different stages of growth. That's
yeah,
why it's
absolutely. And
important.
that is another problem because if you the way it sets is it will come up to its first bifurcation, set one fruit, and then it starts to bifurcate the plant. And so if you lose some of those first set, it may impact when those fruit are going to actually be ripe. So that's why growing degree days is not going to necessarily work. You also need to look at the fruit to look for that glossy appearance, that firmness.
And then after you harvest it, are there things to look for in the seeds that indicate that it's mature or?
Well, typically green chili, the seed aren't mature yet. So that's one thing. And for breeding, for breeding purposes, then of course, you can't say, oh, this is a beautiful green chili. I'm going to take the seed out of and keep this line going. You can't do it. You need to keep some of the fruit on there to fully mature.
All right. So let me know if you want to know more about this. If it's how to tell when your chili pepper is ripe, especially that green chili pepper versus a red mature chili pepper. What kind of disease problems you might be dealing with. Do you want to know more about the heritage lines that we mentioned? Leave a comment and thanks for listening.